In this episode, I sit down with Katie Anderson, author of the Shingo Award-winning book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, leadership coach, and creator of the Japan Leadership Experience. We started with her Daruma dolls, these weighted Japanese figures that represent the patience and perseverance it takes to reach a goal. You fill in one eye when you set the intention, the other when you achieve it. And they always right themselves when they fall, which ties to the Japanese proverb, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Katie discovered them in her kids' preschool when her family moved to Tokyo, and they've become a symbol for everything she teaches. From there, we got into the real substance, why Toyota's only secret, according to her mentor Isao Yoshino, is its attitude towards learning. Why companies keep copying Toyota's tools but missing the mindset. Why we're all stuck in plan, do, and skipping the study and adjust, where learning actually lives. Katie introduced this distinction between control-based leadership and influence-based leadership. This idea that you can't control your way to an empowered culture. You have to create conditions for people to come to yes for themselves. We talked about what it's like to go from critiquing leaders to actually building something yourself, the humility that comes from that. We connected the Japanese concept of omotenashi, deep service, with the Sanskrit phrase, Atiti Devo Bhava, the guest is God. And we got into AI, how Katie is using it to accelerate her thinking on her new book about influence and this question of whether we use these tools to elevate humans or diminish them. It was one of those conversations where the thread kept getting richer. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Hello and welcome to the Living Code podcast. My guest today is Katie Anderson, author of Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, a book that came out of something most people would probably never do, which is she moved her entire family to Japan for 2 years to learn directly from Isao Yoshino, a retired Toyota leader, about what it actually means to build a culture where people grow. Yeah. And so Katie is one of the most respected voices in the lean and continuous improvement world. But what I think makes her work special is that she's not really a lean person. She's a learning person. She coaches senior leaders on how to ask better questions, create psychological safety, build organizations that actually get smarter over time instead of just getting busier over time. And I've admired her work for a while, and there's a lot of overlap between what she's exploring and what we're trying to build with Living Code, and especially this idea that the best leadership isn't about having answers, it's about creating the conditions for wisdom to emerge. So, Katie, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Andrew. And it's a pleasure to be here. And it was amazing to be able to meet in person recently in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I look forward to many more conversations and opportunities beyond this as well.
And Katie is surrounded by these Daruma dolls. I'm not sure if you can see them here in the image, the one that I got from her earlier, but I don't know, maybe it's not a bad place to kick off. Do you want to tell us briefly about the Daruma doll?
Yes, I'm a bit obsessed by them and have become my trademark. First, I want to say it was serendipity that my family moved to Japan. It was actually for my husband's job, not for mine. And I happened to meet Mr. Yoshino months before I moved to Japan. So it's like the coalescing of all these other forces, but truly the stars were aligned, and I took the greatest opportunity gift that was given to me and wanted to transform that to something even more. And I showed up in Japan with I call myself a learning enthusiast, like the learning enthusiast mindset to not only learn as much as possible for myself as a continuous improvement leadership practitioner, who I just started my consulting practice, as well as to share that. So I started writing a blog and so much more. But I believe in learning and sharing learning. And that's truly what I call the chain of learning. And when we were in Japan, so this was 2015 and 16, my kids were really little. And in preschool, I discovered these Daruma dolls. They were all over my kids' preschool class. And I was like, what are these? I'm intrigued. They're these typically red paper mache dolls. They can be of other colors in all different sizes, and they're weighted at the bottom. And I am truly obsessed with them. I have a large collection. I go on a pilgrimage to the Daruma temple in Japan when I take leaders to Japan with me twice a year on my Japan leadership experience. And they represent the founder of Zen Buddhism in Japan, the Bodhidharma, actually. And the reason it's just a head is because he sat for so long in meditation that his arms and legs atrophied.
One of my workout plans.
So not for you, but your Buddhism background.
Love the dedication.
True dedication to mindfulness and reflection. They're symbols of good luck in Japan and of the luck and the patience and perseverance it takes to achieve a goal. So when you have a goal, you fill in the doll's left eye and it waits there patiently. It's weighted at the bottom, so it literally writes itself back up like a little weeble wobble. And when you achieve your goal, you can fill in the doll's right eye. And of course, in Japan, they bring them to the temple and burn them at the end of the year. I keep my collection. However, there's also this Japanese proverb, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And I love it. And this is what the Daruma also represents. So we know we're going to have stumbles, challenges, setbacks, everything on the path towards success or achieving our goal. But what's important is we get back up and continue our way forward. And I like to say we learn our way forward, right? So it's like, how do we learn our way towards success or towards that goal? Because where we started is not where we're going to end up. It's about the path towards the success rather than just the destination itself. And I think that goes really beautifully with the concepts of continuous improvement and looking at process as the way to get to results. So, anyway, I'm obsessed with them. And if you meet me, I will likely give you one. So, Andrew
And
has his
I
gift
can
from me.
attest. I can attest.
Yes, yes,
I do, as do the other participants in the dinner that we had
yes,
a
yes.
month ago or so. It's such an amazing combination of very simple practices that you describe being imbued in this ritual and this practice. And I'm just struck by how your children's preschools were full of them, and how interesting to have that as your first introduction to the learning world. I think my preschool was filled with blocks to put square pegs in round holes, which I never succeeded on, and cubby holes and chocolate milk and these kinds of things. But what do you think it does to a person's personality if you're being introduced to that idea that learning takes perseverance,
Oh,
that
yeah.
even at the end, even once you succeed, you're going to burn that whole thing in a
Mhm.
ritual way? I don't know.
There were plenty of blocks and all the typical things in my kids' preschool classroom as well. And I love that this was an international school. We were only there for 2 years, so I wasn't immersing them at that point at the age of 1 and 4 or 5 into a full Japanese experience. But they brought in a lot of the Japanese culture and trying to teach that. To have a conversation about what the Daruma represents and fall down 7 times, get up 8 is powerful. And this is why I've really grown so attached to the Daruma because it's a visual symbol of the path that's not straight and narrow, that is full of twists and turns and stumbles to be able to get to where we need to be, which is maybe not where we thought we were going in the first place. But sometimes, often it is. Sometimes we learn along the way that the course needs to be adjusted. So I love it so much. And it's the foundation, it's the part of the growth mindset. Carol Dweck, who I'm so honored was on my podcast. It's so powerful, right? We have to know that it's not just the success that comes naturally, it's all the work that gets there, and that failure is part of that, stumbles are part of that. But it's how we respond to that's really going to create our strength. And that's what we need in our organizations. It's that resilience and learning mindset.
You've inspired me. After we finish the recording, I'm going to figure out my intention and paint in the right eye on
Okay.
that
Left
shingle.
eye, the
So
doll's left eye.
left eye. I'll start with the
Yeah.
doll's left eye. Because it's then there as a singular reminder of your main goal. And I think
Yes.
that aspect of focus is also quite important, right? Because it's very easy for me to get some vast and endless accumulation of many goals. But if you have one singular goal with physical representation in
Yes.
front of you, that's very powerful. And I don't know, I think a lot about remote work. I've been mostly I know you started your lean and continuous improvement journey in the healthcare space. And
Yeah.
a lot of that has to happen in real life because there's a patient there. Now, my introduction to lean has been in the tech world, and everybody is virtual and remote. And I often think about how I believe there's a kind of deep disorientation that happens when people are not in the same room together. And I contrast that with the idea of creating, why am I blanking on the name? The room where you make everything visible
Oh,
around
the
you,
Obeya.
the Obeya
Yeah.
room.
Obeya just means big room. So it's a misnomer even to say a Obeya room. But yes, the Obeya is the space where we gather to look at things, the visual wall. Yeah.
And the characteristic of being together in one big room is
Yes.
that you can decorate that room with reminders of what it is that you're working on. And you can
Mm,
keep in the visual space. So when you walk in there, you're like, oh, the project. No matter how distracted you might have been on your commute in or what fires you've been putting out
mm,
the day before, you come back in there and I believe that it creates coherence
mm,
with groups that I think is quite hard to get in the digital and fully virtual world. I
mm.
don't know, any thoughts on that?
Yes. And even since the pandemic, a lot of healthcare leadership and teams that are doing continuous improvement, like they end up being remote based work too. So much has shifted. So, yes, the actual patient care is there in person, but so much of the support structures have gone virtual or remote for a lot of the time. So this is a challenge that isn't just unique to knowledge work or software engineering, but how do we bring the same principles, right? So I believe strongly in getting together as person. When you invited me to dinner, we'd never even met, and you're like, I'm moving to San Francisco, I'm getting together. I said, yes, that sounds great. So I'm a connector and I love being together in person. And there's a lot of work that we all do that's virtual and remote. So how can we bring the principles forward to maybe create something different? So we talked about visual representation and that the power of Obeya is not necessarily, some of it's the coming together, but also the visual communication, right? And so how can we have shared visual systems to understand the status of work or what the priorities are? And how do we have human connection? We're talking about that some of those human elements, even though in this digital and AI world, how do we make sure that we're having that human connection too, to stay aligned, stay connected, and stay focused?
And I remember how incredibly, almost heartbreaking it was to be one of my previous jobs. I had a chance to be in a weekly meeting with the CEO and my boss, who was another executive in the company. And they were just talking past each other the entire time. The CEO would be arguing about one thing, my boss would be arguing about something different. A bunch of us were as spectators, like we were at a UFC fighting ring and
Mm,
just like watching these two people fight. I felt so strongly they weren't looking at the same thing. They were talking past each other. They weren't looking together at
mm, mm,
one common body of information. They both were just verbally
mm,
talking. And I was so clear in those meetings that they had different mental models or
mm.
pictures of what was going on. They were
Yeah.
talking about how bad it was or how good it was based on different information.
Yes, operating, like reacting from some different perspective, but not even maybe looking at the same destination. And I think what you're highlighting too is we often live in this not having the alignment and seeing the same thing. So critical. Are we talking even about the same thing? And then the second is, you kept saying they kept talking on top of each other. They were just advocating for their own position. And this gets fundamentally to what I call, we need to break the telling habit, because we live in this world of advocacy over inquiry. And how powerful if one of them had stood back and asked a few more questions like, what are you seeing, or what's the outcome you're looking for here, or asking some of those open-ended clarifying questions opposed to just telling, and then we're not actually getting alignment or collaboration or even clarity on what is it the problem we're trying to solve, and are we trying to solve the same one? What is that problem? So the more we can actually lead with that inquiry before the advocacy, before the telling, that will also help create the alignment and actually foster deeper and more powerful conversation.
That rhymes for me with one, at least my understanding, one way that lean is sometimes summarized as this plan, do, study, adjust loop. But there's this tendency to plan and do and plan and do and
Mm,
plan and do and plan and do, but
yeah.
never sit back and actually study or adjust. If I think about adjusting, for me, that means the same as learning. It's like I'm
Mm,
adjusting my mental model,
mm,
among other things. When you talk about open-ended questions, it feels like it's a prompt that it's inviting listening, it's
yes.
inviting studying, it's inviting
Yeah.
learning as opposed to.
Yes, and I say the same thing all the time, like, in our Western culture, for the most part, we're in a do, or maybe plan, do, plan, do, plan, do, and that study adjust part of the cycle is often seen as we need to check the box, or we do it at a very surface level, or it doesn't happen because all our meetings are scheduled and calendars are full. And that's where the learning happens. And then it's both through the reflection, the study, and then the adjustment. So it's like the study is where the learning happens, the adjustment is where actually it's enacted, right? So it moves from
Mhm.
just a cerebral learning to a practical learning. I start my book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, off with the quote from Mr. Yoshino, who was at Toyota. And I was so curious when I first moved to Japan and we were having these conversations, what was the secret to Toyota's success? And it's like all these companies around the world are trying to apply what we call lean, or now agile, and other offshoots of truly the Toyota production system and the Toyota way. And he kept saying that there's no secret. And then one day he said, actually, maybe the only secret is Toyota's attitude towards learning. And it's in that study adjust is the part about the learning. And they're like, we don't even notice and we take it for granted. So it's about focusing on creating the conditions for people to learn and actually taking the time to learn and do something with that learning, opposed to the do. And it's so powerful. And this is that shift that we're trying to help other companies and cultures make. get a renewed focus on the learning and how do we bring in the principles, maybe not the exact tools, because like the tools are only there to serve the practice.
I remember one of my favorite books is Lean Enterprise by one of the co-authors, Barry O'Reilly, who we were just recently talking about. And it was in that book, I think, that I first learned these stories about how companies like GM would go and attempt to replicate every square foot of a Toyota plant to try to get to replicate the same results,
Yeah.
and run that for a year. And Toyota was incredibly generous in terms of letting them video and take
Yeah.
photos and ask questions and replicate all you want, sure.
Yeah.
And they would come back a year later and say, we're really not getting the same results that you were getting. What are we doing wrong? And they said, oh, well, let's go and see your factory. And it looks like the Toyota one did a year before. And they said, oh yeah, we haven't used that approach for a year, right?
Yeah.
Because of that characteristic of learning and continually
Yeah.
adapting, as opposed to
Yeah. Just trying to put the
that was
tool on
there,
there. Yeah.
that was there maybe to solve a very specific problem that was specific to that factory's
At that moment in
geographic
time. And
location at
yeah,
that moment.
this is one of the challenges I have with how the word lean, and then how it's been translated into the West is we tend to take the thing that feels most easy, the simple, let's like put the tool on it. But then it also gets codified as this is the way, this is the only way. And you're only doing lean if it's this way. It has this tool and this framework. Actually, the Toyota way is all about these are conditions for learning. And they're like the ideas and concepts. Of course, like how do you have flow? How do you have built-in quality? That but what that looks like totally depends on the situation and the organization and the product and the way of working. And so I see a lot of rigidity in the way people talk about lean or agile, that it has to be these certain ways, where actually we're missing the point, right? And so it's the secret is learning about people and how do we apply the principles, but not get overly focused on the visual artifact, you might say.
I'm feeling into a personal story and personal situation where I'm at my learning edge. I observed interactions in the corporate world, such as the one I described before, of people just talking past each other. And I just thought, well, it's just these egos involved. You need humility. And I could do it so much better than these people. And then, of course, you set out to create your own small business, as I've done at Living Code. And you have built your own teaching, coaching, consulting business. And certainly my experience, I think everybody's experience is, whoa, it's a lot harder than you thought it was going to be. It's really easy to sit back and look at somebody else being a CEO running a company or the president or whatever else and say, oh, I would do it so much better, the armchair quarterbacking. And then
Yeah.
you get out on the field and you're like,
Right.
whoa.
Yeah, that we miss the empathy, right? Like leadership's
Mhm.
hard. I was actually just having a conversation with my son about that. He turned 15 this week, and he's like, "It's interesting, Mom. You like a leadership consultant and coach, but it's been a while since you've been like in that type of role." And I said, "Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I still have my own like worst, like my own scars from doing that and the learning by doing from the first many years of my career." And I think if we can just remember how hard it is to manage a team, to set strategic direction, and you have to come from a place of empathy that you don't have all the answers. You have some ideas that can help someone, but how do we help them create the conditions for them to be successful? And I'm talking more and more about this shift between control-based leadership and what I'm calling influence-based leadership. It's if we want this high-performing, people-centered learning culture, we cannot control our way there. The only way, even if you have a title, is through influence. And by influence, I don't mean I'm so influential and I'm going to tell you what to do, but influence by creating the conditions for people to come to yes to themselves, to solve problems, to get aligned, to all of these things. How do we bring people along so that their hearts are in it as well? And you're not just getting compliance, which is what like more of a command-based leadership has. And this is really what Toyota's done very successfully. And when we don't have that leadership through influence, and instead we're trying to have leadership by control, we're putting in place just the tools, that's where we see things break down. And so we have to break this sort of mental model of what leadership is to really have all of this be successful. So I think there's a lot of the challenges we've had, why quote unquote lean's failed or agile's not working, because it's seen as projects that someone comes in and implements and does, rather than a true mindset shift of what leadership is and what it means to create the conditions.
Did I hear you say coming to yes for themselves?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Do you want to just unpack that?
So I did a survey last year of over 100 change leaders in our network responded, people who are part of my newsletter or even on LinkedIn, and all different backgrounds and different roles. So from internal and external change leader consultants to executives to directors and operational leaders who are trying to create these high performing people centered learning cultures. Call it lean, agile, whatever the discipline is that you call it. And I asked, what do you love about this type of work? And what are the things that frustrate you? So the things that people love are like solving problems, helping other people solve problems, creating meaningful impact. The number one across the board, overwhelming frustration is leadership buy-in. How do we get leaders buy-in? How do we get them to yes? And you cannot force anyone to a yes. So it doesn't matter if it's a leader or it's a team member. You might get short-term compliance. You may say, this is the way, this way or the highway. And then there's a decision point. But if you're really trying to create a culture where learning and people and empowered problem solving is the fabric of the culture, you cannot force people to that decision. And the way to get like, how do we get leadership buy-in is not through force or I'm going to convince you. It's how do I create the conditions that help you understand and see this potential impact of leading this way or creating this culture this way and get you to say, I want to try that, or I'm willing to step forward. I may not know how to do it yet, but I'm at yes. It's the same thing about trying to get salespeople who are trying to force you to buy something versus trying to help paint the picture of what problem do you need to solve? What's in it for you? And surface your concerns, your challenges, your fears, your desires, and help create the conditions that allow you to get to that yes. So that's what I call being a yes-minded persuader. It's not forceful. It's creating the conditions to help someone get to yes.
Sales was exactly what came to mind when you were describing what that meant. And that would be one way of describing the job of a salesperson, to get
Yeah, I mean,
somebody to yes. The hardest things about trying to create a new organization is the sales and marketing aspect, because I have such a deeply cultivated disdain for manipulative tendencies that are not actually about helping other people, sort of an extractive mindset
yeah,
versus a regenerative or beneficial mindset.
yeah,
But as you framed selling just there in your brief summary, it's about what problem are you trying to solve? And
yeah.
do I have something that I could offer you to help you to
Mm,
get towards the solution of that? And so fundamentally pro-social framing of
yes.
sales and marketing. I think of Toyota compared to many corporations as a pro-social organization. They're thinking about what is their long-term impact on
Mm,
society. It may be at the risk of
yeah,
exaggeration. At least there's the possibility that business can be pro-social.
yeah. I
Comments,
mean, that
feedback, is that accurate?
no, it's same thing. I talked to Derek Roberts, who wrote a great book called Listen to Sell, and they are a sales and marketing like training company. And that's his whole point. And I loved the framing in his book, regardless, and it resonated with me. If we're change leaders or change agents, whether or not you have a positional role or more of a consultant, internal practitioner role, you're trying to sell the vision of a change or a different future or a different way of being. So you are a salesperson. And but there's difference of sales is there's the sleazy sales or the ramrod sales, which gives sales a bad name
Right.
versus this other framework, which is truly around creating the conditions for people to get to yes to themselves. I think it's such a powerful, important reframe. And so, actually, this book I'm writing is building on these influence skills and capabilities that I believe all leaders need to have. And also framing if we are trying to lead through control, we're actually showing up in the exact opposite way of the culture we're trying to create. And we're not even aware sometimes of how we're doing that. And so, how do we recognize that? And then, how do we start? There are things we do have to tell, set the direction, be clear on the expectations and standards. There's a room for telling and directiveness. But if we're trying to control our way to an empowered culture, it's just not going to happen. So, how do we show up in a different way? And how do we reframe some of the words like what does influence mean? What is persuasion? What does selling mean? To something different. How do I speak to leaders, not coming in with my lingo and my methodologies and my tools, but really helping understand what problem they need to solve? And how do I speak in a language that resonates with them? So there's some Japanese concepts that I think are really nice to show that nuance, like the concept of omotenashi, which is about how do I serve you and create this incredible experience. It's usually translated as hospitality or service, but it's so much deeper than that. It's about how do you create the experience by showing up by what the other person needs to be most helpful for them. And so it's like letting go of that ego for yourself and truly being in service of someone else. And I think it's a really important nuance that we miss in our often Western approach to what change means and how that happens.
It's funny, this idea of hospitality, what can I do for you? And that spirit of generosity immediately reminded me of this phrase that's very commonly used in India, Atiti Devo Bhava, which is that the guest is God. The guest is God. And I know it's a, I'm sure it comes from one of the traditional Indian scriptures, but I know one of the early Indian PMs took that as a marketing campaign to try to invite people to come as tourists to India, right? It's like the guest is God, meaning like all of these American, European tourists, whatever, and acting in whatever rude ways and so forth. But respect these people, treat them as guests in your country, right? And this idea of even somebody from a radically different culture who doesn't understand what's going on and so forth, to receive that person with an open heart and an open mind and an open intention, an open will. Certainly in the IT industry, my rough estimate is that 75% of IT workers that I've ever interacted with are of an Indian origin, Indian ethnicity. And there's just been such a generous and collegial spirit from almost all of my Indian colleagues. And I just feel there's something in the fabric of that culture that predisposes people towards patience, or predisposes them towards listening, and predisposes them towards generosity. Maybe not infinitely, but enough to get to a collaborative relationship, a cooperative relationship. There's a harmony between those two cultural elements, but it's...
I say the same thing in Japan, in my experience with Japanese culture. And I always want to emphasize, doesn't mean that the whole country is this way. There are certain elements that maybe create the foundation for some of that more, but certainly it's not that like everyone shows up that way. So it's a balance, but I agree. It's the same thing. I'm making broad brushstrokes about Western culture. We tend to have more of a outcomes driven, focused, the way our culture has been created, short-term, let's be the leader with all the answers, that we reward expertise, certainty, and all of that. Don't come to me with a problem, come with a solution. Actually, we want to create the conditions to make sure we even understand what the real problem is first. So are we reinforcing this whole, I don't want to hear the thinking, we just come action oriented, let's do. Maybe we're just slapping on a ton of band-aids to a deeper problem that we're not actually surfacing there. So it comes from a good space, but maybe it actually does a disservice to us sometimes.
And I made these gross generalizations. And anytime you make these gross and stereotypes, it actually feels to me not that different from the way in a corporate environment or work environment, we have these concepts of the way things are that we superimpose on reality. And I think it's deeply natural, because learning does mean you walk away with a bit of knowledge or some concept that's a sort of a generally applicable rule. But implicit in that is you're going to try to apply that rule to different situations and scenarios, but it'll always be a bit imperfect. And there always has to be this dialogue between our mental models of the world and reality. And there always has to be a humility that is, I guess, at the root of that learning mindset, that in the event of an impasse between my mental model and reality, I have to let reality win. And that takes work.
Well, I mean, well, let's not go off on that tangent, but yes.
I guess one of the questions that was coming up is, I work a lot, this is so overdone really as a topic, but AI, and then all of this buzz about it. We're both based around the Bay Area. You go into San Francisco and every one of the billboards is selling different AI tools. And you mentioned about lean and agile and people maybe misunderstanding them. But all of the buzz these days is in the tech companies about how do you use AI and to accelerate things. And there certainly seems to be one scenario in which AI functions to erode our social skills. We're just in dialogue with a
Machine.
chatbot
Yeah.
and not actually in dialogue with each other. That would be
Mm.
one harmful scenario. Anyway, does that play into your thinking about corporate culture these days?
Well, for sure. That was the whole point of the conversation that you structured when we all got together was natural intelligence and artificial intelligence and how do we think about that? It's amazing. Every month I'm using AI more and like more tools coming out and like discovering as it's growing and getting more sophisticated what it can do. And with any technology, there has always been the risk that we erode the human element and we use it to like diminish humans. That always exists. But we still control how we use the AI and it or the tool or whatever the technology. eh, and how can we instead see it as a way to amplify and accelerate and lift up our humanness? I just talked to Barry O'Reilly. He's going to be on my podcast. He has a new book coming out called Artificial Organizations. And it was talking about the same thing. There's human things that the AIs, at least right now, can't do around judgment in our human connection as well. How can we have AI help us get to better decisions sooner, but we still are making the decisions? How are we coming into meetings more informed? How are we not wasting as much time with all like meeting summaries and extraction? I think it's incredible. Like I've actually been able to accelerate my thinking by using AI. Like I'm writing a new book all around influence and I've pulled in all the transcripts from the podcast, my chain of learning podcasts, and asked it to pull out key themes, phrases. It would have taken me so long to do that before. It's not writing it for me, but it's helping me synthesize, crystallize, making decisions. I can say, what are some gaps that I'm missing here that I might need to consider? Wow, that's so helpful for us. And I think so. How does it help us? I think we're all learning, but we have a choice in there on how we use the AI. We need to always, with any technology, come from like, what's our ethical decision making around things and where do we want to let it go? And that's a human decision, right? The machines don't care about the ethics per se. That's a human thing.
And I would say ethics would be on my very short list of things that humans remain deeply
Well,
responsible for.
that's yes. We do not want to outsource that to the machines though. How do you think
The
about it, Andrew? It's been like a month and a half since we talked last, and so much is changing, and my thinking's evolving. And how is your thinking evolving as it
Yeah,
relates?
it's interesting because I'm trying to build more humility about how much I could benefit from making more strategic use of
Mm,
AI. Like I'm happy that I have a strongly developed tendency to want to do
mm.
things on my own, including wanting to do the thinking on my own. I'm happy that I grew up in the old days where you'd have to do your own
Analog,
thinking.
yeah. Dewey
um,
Decimals.
even between Dewey Decimal and the internet age, you have to at least do your own reading and
Mm,
your own writing and whatever else.
mm,
And so it's good to have those well-developed strengths. I'm trying to really let in the humility to
mm,
say, I could be so much a better person, even a better human. Like sometimes when I've put in some questions about interpersonal interactions
mm,
to AI, I've gotten back advice that was deeply valuable. My dad's
mm,
in a quite aged and now infirm state. And a few months ago, I just asked the question, how should I approach him? And he
mm,
said, don't approach him superimposing your own mental picture of
mm,
who this person was or who you always wanted him to be. Can you finally say the things I wanted you to say, Dad, or whatever? Approach him as a fellow traveler on the path who's now neither of you are the same person you were 40 years ago, right?
yeah.
Both of you are going through dramatically different things.
Mm,
He's losing his physical and mental
mm,
capabilities. Things are hard for him, like finding the right word, remembering what's going on, standing up. Things are hard for him that were never before hard for him. And how do you approach him with compassion,
yeah.
given that this appears to be the current state? Given that's the current state, I see why that's so hard for you. And I guess I'm trying to reconnect that with the themes of our talk. I think
Mm,
in organizations, they're organizations of humans and we're all going through our own stuff. There's the persona we bring to work,
mm,
and then there's the sort of private struggles and challenges we're
yeah.
each bringing behind the scenes. And then sometimes sometimes I do stupid things and
We all do.
stupid things because there's some small elements missing, a little bit of memory, a little bit of planning, a little bit of humility, a little bit of whatever. But there is a degree of compassion in meeting everybody where we are today,
Mm,
including with our current ability to learn and learn from
mm,
each other.
mm. Yeah.
So that's one
No,
aspect.
no, and that links back to what we were saying before too. It goes back to empathy and having this human and how do you that was great that the AI that you worked with was able to frame some questions and some things for you and that helped you. You had to still do the reflection and the thinking, but it framed some things up and it helped enable you to get there yourself. So great.
And I had to have the humility to think maybe this does apply to me. Like maybe
Yeah.
this is advice that I could take in. And I guess one of the other things you asked, what I'm learning, echoing around in my mind, is a blog post I read recently and a talk I heard from Ivan Zhao, the founder of Notion.
Mm,
He wrote a blog post called Steel, Steam, and Infinite Minds, talked about how when we used to only have iron, the tallest building you could build of iron and bricks was 4 or 5 stories tall.
yeah.
Only when you got steel could you build a building that's 10, 20, 50, 100 stories tall, that the building material enables something dramatically different. Same with steam
Mm,
power
mm,
enables something dramatically different from
mm,
water power,
mm,
where regardless of how much it rained, you can choose how much you want the wheels to turn with
yeah.
steam. And then what if the new building material is infinite minds? That's
Mm,
a wildly
mm,
that one framing now is we've discovered how to convert electricity into minds, which is wild as a
yes.
framing. And if you're bringing those infinite minds into your organization and you're gradually developing an artificial organization, to borrow Barry's term, that dilutes the humans, but it doesn't remove the humans. The humans
Yeah.
are still these critically important elements, but
Mm,
there's now a milieu, a
mm,
social environment
yeah.
of human and artificial intelligences.
Yeah. That's the new world. It's a great experiment, right? So we got to put our learning mindset and our growth mindset on. That's not the world we're in anymore. So you either take it on and try and learn, or you will get left behind and not have the competitive advantage of others who are leveraging AIs to help complement their learning and complement their effectiveness, but not removing. So we want to elevate humans, not diminish them. That's the key.
Thinking about that scenario, it occurs to me that one way that lean is often framed is as a way of operating in complexity, in a
Mm,
complex environment where things are
mm,
continuously changing and there's countless parts, and you can't know in advance what the right answer is. And when you have a bunch of humans and infinite minds, infinite artificial minds, and so forth, at the very least, you have an even more complex
mm,
environment. And so it
mhm.
feels, I know some people feel like Agile, that was 2001, and we're on to this
Yeah.
brave new world here. But what we're on to is complexity, even more complexity,
Mm,
even more rapid change, right? So, what have we learned in the last few decades about how do you operate in complexity? How do you operate when you can't know in
yeah.
advance, when you're not the expert? And I think that inquiry, that spirit of asking,
Yeah.
that spirit of listening rather than telling is
It's
essential.
it is essential. And this is where we have to move from this sense that I can control it. It's more of how do I flex and how do I bring people along and how do I create the conditions within the organization structurally, individually to collaborate and solve those real problems.
Amazing and thought provoking, and super grateful to have a chance to share
Mm,
this conversation with you, Katie. As we're closing up, what are you learning right now?
Yeah, so a few things. It's been really refreshing to have some space that I dedicated to do some deep thinking the last 2 months. So a few things that I've learned. I created this influence model to help change leaders a long time ago, and it's under the acronym Catalyst. It's like, how do we catalyze change through behaviors and have a learning mindset to create this learning organization? And I said that's where the starting point for my book was. And I've actually totally evolved that the behaviors are still there. We need the influence skills, but that I had one capability, which was being a lifelong learner. And I had this aha where I'm like, actually, that is not an influence skill. It is the foundation for everything. And I knew that, but it was like an aha. So it was like a relearning of like our learning mindset, going back to where we started, that the only secret to Toyota is its attitude towards learning, our connection to how are we learning how to use AI and experiment with that. All of this, it comes back to our willingness not just to learn from a place of acquiring knowledge, but learning through what we need to change through how our mindset, how we're showing up in the world, our behaviors to align with the impact that we want to have. So this is not a new learning, but it's just been an enriched one. And then for me, really just this getting just deeper into what's this difference between, I'm going to back up because I often get asked, like, why go to Japan? Like, why do all these leaders want to go to Japan? Why do all these companies want to, what's the missing element of lean and making this successful? And I realize it's because we're trying to operate within this control based leadership model. And it's really about how do we move much more to, of course, leaders need to set the direction. And that's clear. I call leading to learn, set direction, provide support, develop yourself. But that's where the telling stops. And really we have to help get people aligned. How do we create the conditions, not through controlling the people, but creating the conditions? And I think it's just a really powerful mindset, no matter if you are a vice president of an organization or you're an agile lean practitioner. You can't control your way to a people-based learning organization. And so that's like the essence that I'm unfolding right now in many ways. So I'm learning and unlearning and in the messy middle of it all, but it's exciting space to be in.
I love what came to mind was learning is the catalyst.
Mm.
Then it sounds like part of what your friend,
Mm.
and you are leading another trip to Japan coming up in next
I
year.
have a May program. It's been sold out for a long
Oh.
time, but I have a November program and actively enrolling right now. And it's kbjanderson.com/Japan trips to go learn more. It's not just a trip to Japan. It truly is a transformational experience. Spend a week with me and Mr. Yoshino, but also so much more. I really want to make sure people have the right learning mindset when we go. And so I do a lot of work before the program as well. Yeah, it's great. So I'm so grateful I get to go back to Japan twice a year and go to the Daruma temple. We actually now incorporate a Zen meditation with the Buddhist monk at the Daruma temple as part of the program, which is really great. It's a real nice, special, reflective moment to take a.
It's worth me checking out. Maybe I'll be able to bring my Daruma doll with the
Yes. Oh, yes.
other eye filled in.
That would be great. I'd love to host you anytime.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank
Joy to
you,
be with you.
Andrew.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.